So today I'm going to talk about character arcs and what this means for your Dungeons & Dragons game. Ideally, we all want to play a D&D game in which our character undergoes some growth, be it good or bad. When this happens, the change can often stir emotions of elation or grief, depending on whether a character has achieved their goal or not. An example of this could be a druid who has saved their forest from a terrible blight, or a young artificer who has just learned how to infuse their bionic arm with some basic magical energy. On the other hand, we have grief, which occurs when a character has fulfilled their arc but not in the way they wanted, or needed to. On a basic level, this could be failing to achieve a goal, but on a deeper level, it may mean not correcting some character flaw that is holding them back. So when creating a character arc, it helps to think about stories you are familiar with and how you felt when the character you were rooting for realised their dream or achieved the impossible. Likewise, with tragic heroes, what emotions did you feel when a character you were invested in succumbed to a flaw, such as their hubris or ego? This can be seen in Breaking Bad with Walter White. As time goes on, he seeks more and more power and respect. He will never be content or full with what he has, and this is what ultimately destroys him. But how do we develop a character arc? What can help? There are many tools and techniques for developing compelling characters, but a favourite of mine is the Plot Embryo, or Story Circle, as it is otherwise known. This narrative structure was popularised by Dan Harmon, who writes Rick and Morty. But it's actually based off the hero's journey, which was developed by Joseph Campbell. Another word for the hero's journey is a monomyth. Now, the monomyth is a template or scaffold which underpins a lot of stories and plots across many cultures. Monomyths typically set out the path of a hero's journey. A hero is usually the main character of a story, but not always. The general structure of a monomyth, or hero's journey, is that the hero goes on an adventure, faces some challenges, overcomes those challenges, and then returns home changed or transformed. The type of transformation the hero undergoes often separates a regular hero from a tragic hero. Good transformation or growth results in a hero, while bad transformation or corruption results in a tragic hero. There are 8 steps to the Plot Embryo or Story Circle. The hero's journey has more, but Dan Harmon streamlined it. I suppose making it easier to use, as the original was more for high fantasy settings. Next, I'm going to outline those 8 steps so that you can use them in your own campaign. The first step is the comfort zone. This is where your character is just before they embark on their adventure, and pending change. Now, just because they're in the zone of comfort, this doesn't mean they're happy. It just means they've accepted their lot for now. However, their wants and needs are still not fulfilled in some way, which makes the prospect of change tempting. Let's use the Godfather as an example. Michael has a great life. He's a decorated military man with a great career ahead of him, yet he feels unfulfilled. The second step is need. This is where conflict is introduced and the character begins to want something. It compels them to take action and basically sets their story in motion. So if we go back to Michael in The Godfather, he begins his descent into the family business after the assassination attempt on his father's life, who is Vito. This is a point where Michael chooses to abandon his morals and insert himself into the family business. The need Michael had was a longing to be closer to his family, or maybe father in particular. The emotional barriers he put up to keep out of the family business were perhaps depriving him of the love and closeness he needed from them. The third step is crossing the threshold, or entering an unfamiliar situation. So our character has decided to make a change, and they are beginning to take action to fulfill that change. In D&D, this is the point a character goes on adventure or accepts a challenge of some sort. But if we use our Godfather example again, this is the point Michael begins to get really involved with the family business. He is no longer an observer. In particular, this is most obvious when he enters the hospital to switch his father's room to prevent another assassination attempt from occurring. The fourth step is adaptation. Here our character is in the trenches. They are encountering even more obstacles in this new world they find themselves in. They are facing many trials and tribulations, and it's at this point they begin to undergo some change. Hence the adaptation. They can't go back, they can only go forward. So with Michael, if we were to trace his steps in The Godfather, I'd say this is the point he takes care of Virgil Solozzo and the corrupt police chief officer, Mark McCluskey, both of whom played a large role in his father's assassination attempt. After Solozzo and McCluskey are taken care of, Michael flees to Sicily, where he has to navigate a new culture, and of course, live under the radar. The fifth step is Attainment. At this stage in the arc of your campaign, your characters or merry band of adventurers have to achieve or gain something. Perhaps they've been on an adventure to find a treasure map. After going through hell, they finally have it in their hands. But lo and behold, the treasure is another world away. So onwards they go. At this point, it's good to introduce some more stakes. For example, perhaps the treasure's on a volcanic island that's about to erupt. To revisit Michael, though, on his journey to becoming the Godfather, I say this is the point he marries Apollina, a local girl he has taken a shine to. He's finding his feet in Sicily, but there is a cost to this, as he later experiences in the most awful and tragic way. The sixth step is a heavy price to pay. So your hero or character has something, but it's cruelly taken away from him. Now, we don't have to interpret this as a literal loss. If we go back to the fifth step, the treasure map isn't going to spontaneously combust, unless you want it to, of course. The loss could also mean giving up something of yourself, or succumbing, albeit temporarily, to a flaw. Think of this step as a low point in your character's journey. So if we go back to Michael, I'd say this is a time when Apollina is killed in a car bomb, meant for him. The person who planted the bomb was also one of his bodyguards, so there's an element of betrayal here too. I'd say this is where the old Michael truly dies, and what we see here is the emergence of the ruthless Godfather he will go on to become. The seventh step is to return to the familiar situation. We're nearly at the end of the circle now, and this is the penultimate stage. Your hero is back in their familiar environment. So with Michael, he's returned to New York a changed man. He was married after all, and had the experience of living in Sicily. But his home has also changed. For starters, Sonny, his older brother, is no longer with them, and his father is getting older. He also restarts his relationship with Kay. However, the family business is becoming more fraught, and conspiracies fuel disagreements, despite Vito, Michael's father, the old Don, negotiating peace after Sonny's untimely demise at the hands of a rival family. The eighth step is fundamental change. We've made it, and we're at the end of our plot embryo or story circle. But what does that mean for your character? Well, depending on their decisions and choices, quite a lot. Do they overcome the hurdles that stand in their way and are better for it? Or do they give in to their flaws or fail to achieve what they intended? For Michael, I'd say it's definitely the latter. When his father Vito dies, he becomes the Don of the family and assumes responsibility for the family business. He's literally gone from hero to monster. He's won the war, but at what cost? He's ultimately lost himself and Kay. He is morally corrupt and is the very man he feared becoming. He's also more callous and calculated than Vito ever was. I attribute this to the trauma of almost losing Vito in the assassination attempt, the death of his first wife, and of course, the death of his brother. At the end of the film, he calmly lies to Kay's face when she asks him about the death of Carlo, his brother-in-law. He calmly and coldly denies any involvement, which he was most certainly involved, and reminds her never to ask him about the family business again. As she leaves the room, she sees his lieutenants kiss his hand, as they did with Vito, and close the door, figuratively and quite literally shutting her out of his life, reaffirming that she and Michael are no longer equals. Well, that ended on quite a depressing note, but in all seriousness, I'd like to hear about your character arcs when playing D&D, and if you would consider using the plot embryo in your campaign. Anyway, that's all for today, folks, and I'll see you in the next one.